Do you think UFOs, the paranormal, weird history, cryptozoology, and outsider art are pretty darn cool? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to High Strangeness with your host, Steve Berg.
The video version. Well, my friends, thank you for listening to another episode of High Strangeness. Today, I have... Look, okay, all right. Joshua Cutchin on, right? Joshua Cutchin is one of my favorite people in the world. He is a dear friend. But the reality about Josh is that he is one of my favorite authors in the world. Favorite authors and thinkers in these topics we talk about here. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, shucks, Steve. It's the Mutual Admiration Society. You know, there's there are short lists of people that I like a lot of people in this field, and there are short lists of people that I love. And I love you, man. So it's good to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Buddy, the feeling is mutual. I think, Josh, I mean, I'm just going to just a real quick little, background of our friendship. You and I met at the oh my God, now I can't remember.
Paramania 2017.
Was it 2017?
In LA, yeah. So it's eight years ago?
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah, and I remember we were standing in the line at the little, it was not a buffet, but it was like a cafeteria-style place at Clifton's.
Yep.
And I remember just saying, like, man, I think you're, like, one of the, going to be, like, the John Keel. I mean, like, I didn't have the framework back then. The John Keel of our generation. And I feel like you've surpassed it. Like, it's one of those things where I have comedian friends and like director friends. I'm like, I can't believe I get to be friends with them. And you're that. You are one of those people.
Well, I that means a lot to me. I'm trying to get better about people saying kind things and trying to walk the line between humility and taking the compliment. So I'll set aside the Keel thing. But yeah, I mean, it really is. That's been the most rewarding thing for me in this field too. Is really the friendships that I've made, and the way that it still is so bizarre to me that there are people in my phone whose books I was reading in middle school. I know. I have phone numbers of people like that. It's
right.
Oh, that's really strange. Right. I don't call up Whitley, but I could call up Whitley. It's what reality do I live in? And,
I know.
But I think that speaks to how approachable a lot of people in this field are. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think there's something about having extraordinary experiences that shows you that we all live in glass houses and that we're all very human, and that the people who integrate those experiences properly see the sort of ideas of unity and unification and transcendence that I think really make them people that are very approachable. And there's only a small handful of people who I think would really let their ego get in the way. So so far so good. I'm glad to not have become one of those people.
I'll let you know, Josh. You're becoming a prick, dude. No, but a couple things I just want to say off the bat, and then we're gonna just dive into it. So, folks, Josh has written this book called Fourth Wall Phantoms, and I absolutely just cannot say enough about it. I will tell you right now, it is, I think without a doubt, my favorite, and to me, the most important book on these topics of the 21st century. It is a top 5 of all time, probably a top 3. Off the top of my head, I would say the Valet trilogy, Eighth Tower by John Keel, and Fourth Wall Phantoms by Joshua Cutchin. I feel like they are breaking ground, and it really was, my eyes felt squeegeed clean in a new way, where I'm looking at things differently. And as a person who has made his living in, for the most part, narrative, for narrative structure, I will never look at writing again. I will never look at art the same again. I take art so seriously. If I'm anything, Josh, it is an art appreciator. And this gave me even a deeper appreciation for art, which is, I can't believe it, I'm saying that. But also, I want to say, I should have invested in highlighters, because I haven't highlighted a book this much since college. I mean, I was telling you before this, my wife was making fun of me, the week I was reading this. I was, clutching my highlighter, when I was walking to the kitchen. I had it in my shirt pocket. Like, she's like, this is like your little, like, security blanket. And I think it is.
I've had books like that before where it's like, I don't need a highlighter, I need a redactor. So that, like, I can take out, because I end up highlighting, you know, once you highlight over 50%, like, it's like, why do I have a highlighter?
That's what she was making fun. She's like, you just highlighted, like, 3 paragraphs. I'm like, yeah, I guess I did. Like, you know, like, I'm going to reread it. But, like, there's so many things that are, like, germane to what I'm interested in, what I'm thinking about, and what I want to talk about that were, like, magically in this book. Like,
well, yeah, I've found that, I've noticed that with a couple of people where they have come to me with stuff that's like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, actually, check out Fourth Wall Phantoms.
yeah.
And I think that speaks to the fact that my hands were not necessarily on the wheel for a lot of this. By which I mean, this is a book of the 2020s.
Yeah.
It's a book of the post-truth era. It's a book of the post-trust in institutions era. It's got all that sort of baked into it because it does sort of illustrate how pliable and malleable our reality is. And the fact that I'm so heartwarmed and reassured by the fact that you enjoyed it, because there have been a couple of people who have come to me, and in hindsight, I didn't realize that I was sort of writing a book that highlighted someone's reading comprehension. By which I mean, like, it says reflections on, you know, the paranormal narrative and fiction is becoming fact. And what I think this book, admittedly, it's a departure from tradition for me, but it's almost kind of memoirish. It really is a snapshot inside my head. And you know, this is the 10th anniversary. Last month was the 10th anniversary of A Trojan Feast, which was like my entry into all these topics. So it was kind of like it kind of has a little bit of a retrospective, reflective flavor to it. And I think that some people, if they don't have that in mind, it's a very different book in that regard. There's a lot of opinion in there. There's a lot of me in there, but you know, it just felt like, given the subject matter, for a lot of different reasons, it was important that I just sort of put my own voice in there, because art is that bridging of the artist's vision and what you bring to it, and it's that the space of meaning that happens in between, I think.
Yes.
And that's also, I think, what the space where the paranormal unfolds. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Well, no, but like, I feel like a part of the power and what really, like, grabs me is that I felt, and this very well could, you know, be more powerful for me since I know you, but like, I felt like a lot of this book was like you were sitting across the room from me, and I was reading the book, putting it down, going, and then high-fiving you. You know, like, I'm like, yes. It's like, I can't, this is the first book I've ever read where I wanted to sit down, have the author sit down in a very comfortable chair in an office, and have me read the book back to you. Like, I feel the need to do that. In fact, Josh, when I see you in Kansas City in July, you're going to be like, wait, Steve, why am I in your hotel? Sit in the chair. I'm going to read your book to you.
Yeah. Well, and you know, that's the exact same thing. You know, so I had my usual team of people helping me out with this. Barbara Fisher was my editor.
We love Barbara Fisher here.
Love Barbara. And then Mike Cleland was,
we love Mike.
You know, doing the interior layout and the cover design. Matt Festa's amazing cover.
So beautiful.
Pick a different real person artist, not an AI artist, but a real person artist, different person to do the cover every time. But you know, Barbara and Mike have been with me on the last couple of projects, and that's something that Mike said too. He's like, Joshua, you know, in his very sort of like very quiet spoken, soft spoken Mike way. Joshua, it's like you're sitting across the room from me, and I love that. you need to write more like that. Like,
yes.
And actually, you know, I haven't. I don't know how apparent it's been, but I haven't had that sort of first-person perspective, opinion, voice in my work. Really, you know, there's a little bit of that in the afterword of Ecology of Souls, but besides that, not really. And this book is all I and me and opinions, and I kind of like it, honestly.
Well, I love it, and also I will say, how absolutely apropos for a book about breaking the fourth wall.
Right, and that's
you have to. I mean, like, you would have been missing a huge opportunity.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, it's germane to the subject matter, so it sort of becomes a bit of a meta book in and of itself. And there's some meta moments that you probably saw too, where certain words are crossed out to provide additional commentary and things like that.
Which I love. I mean, there's like a whole little section that is, you know, entitled High Strangeness, and then crossed out, and it says surrealism.
Yeah. And that was where, those are bespoke pen strokes from Mike Cleland on the PDF. So,
but I will say this too, like, this book it's extremely funny. And I'm not sure, like, in like I think a lot of it is because you're injecting it. And like, if people like don't know you personally, and I think it comes through your interviews and your books, you have a beautiful sense of humor. You're extremely quick. You're a natural yes-ander. Like in the improv world, yes-anding means like following the positive, like, you know, an initiation. Like, you're a natural comedian, but it comes through in this book where I'm laughing. I think you embrace the absurdity of it all, and absurdity can be very funny. I think when looked at with a certain lens.
Well, I appreciate that because, you know, everybody thinks that they're the funniest person in their friend group. You know what I mean? So
that's true.
It's kind of nice to hear somebody else be like, "Oh, you actually are, you know, do have some humor," and that the humor lands. Because that's the other thing is there are few things worse than thinking you're funny and no one else thinking that you're funny.
That's a nightmare. Yeah.
It's a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
I've never bombed on stage, but that's like a flavor of that.
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling. Trust me.
I mean, I have bombed on stage, just not with comedy.
I have. It sucks. Let me tell you.
Plenty of musical bombing on stage. Plenty of lecture bombing on stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the humor and the absurdity of this stuff doesn't get highlighted enough nowadays. You know, that's part of what I find so. I've softened on disclosure. We've had this conversation before. I've softened on disclosure, but that's what I find so droll about the disclosure sort of movement in a lot of ways is that it's so dry and it's so clinical and it's so just. There isn't any of that human, and it's humanity and. Sorry, there isn't any of that humor.
Yeah,
and humor, I think, is really humor is a human element. I think this is a human phenomenon in a lot of ways, where it speaks to us. And you know, with all of our talk of the trickster in these spaces, we forget the fact that the trickster also has humor in there. Like, it's in the name. Like, you know, there's mischief and there's a dark side and there's anti-structurality and liminality and all those things too. But like, it's also humor. Like, that's a big part of the trickster.
Right.
So really sort of giving that a shot in the arm, infusing the book with some of those ideas, I think is important. And you know, I have such a soft spot for high strangeness, and that is always the first casualty in any disclosure season is high strangeness.
Yeah.
You know, it's the thing that people don't really want to engage with. They don't know what to do with. I get it, but like at the same time, it's baked in there. So to have a book that sort of is so high strange that people don't want to touch the topic.
Right.
And it also affords me an opportunity to talk about some other people who just are characters and some other experiences that are just absurd. That was something that I really wanted a chance to do as well. And again, speaks completely to my heart. Yeah,
it does, because I mean, like I say on the show ad nauseum, where I feel like UFOs should be fun and not like to me. What I mean, and we'll move on from disclosure, but disclosure feels like if like your parents liked your music and started listening to your records, I'd be like, no, don't. You're supposed to hate this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but I mean, I think that we fixate on the horrific side of a lot of these topics, you know, because that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the and to be fair, like the alien abduction scenario is more rooted in horror than it is sci-fi.
For sure.
But you know, we focus so hard on the horror, and we forget that old comedian's adage that you know, comedy is tragedy plus distance.
That's exactly right.
And so like I think that's part of it too. You know, I think that they're two sides of the same coin.
Right.
And
right.
That needs to be in there.
Well, I was mentioning to you, you know, and look, I'm going to be very careful not to spoil this book because I want everyone to read it.
Maybe we should say what the hell the book's about. Like,
right. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, you know, it's hard because it's so fresh in my head. I'm like, everyone read it. No,
right.
Let's do that. You know what? Let's start. You're right. Let's talk about give me like what the book is about, and then we're gonna go from there.
Yeah, I'll give a quick
thank you. I appreciate you recommending that.
I do the same thing, and honestly, Steve, this has been like the hardest book to talk about because it's so like open-handed and loosey-goosey and like kind of what's felt rather than deduced. Right?
It's the jazz, mantra baby. It's a jazz book.
Really is. So there are reports of characters from fiction that step over into our world. famous example with Alan Moore, who saw his character John Constantine from DC/Vertigo Comics. This is not uncommon. There are books there are accounts upon accounts of this happening, and oftentimes happening to people whom we regard as, celebrated authors, celebrated creatives of all stripes. But it also happens to, consumers of media as well. Like, they will see a fictional character that they didn't create. So, when I pitch this book to people, they're like, "Oh, it's a book about tulpas, or it's a book about egregores," and I'm like, I think it's more interesting than that. Like, you have to engage with that subject matter a little bit, but I think it's more the whole idea of tulpas and egregores, I think, is a little bit like anthropocentric, right? It's like, I created this through my focus, and I'm like, no, this thing was always out there, and it found you, and it used you as a conduit to come into being. Like, you were you are a media. You are not.
Yeah, you're just
an
renting
origin
it.
source. Yeah. So that, and then what that does is that affords you, I think, the opportunity to talk about how fictions bleed into the world of ufology and the world of parapsychology, and fictions appearing in the world of cryptozoology, which I don't think anybody's really talked about that much. And I finally got to write about Predator, which is
which is
so excited, so happy. So and then also this idea of like, well, what is a fourth wall break in narratological terms, and how does that speak to the themes that we see in the paranormal, of sort of transgressing boundaries and breaking boundaries and transcendence and all those things. And I think that it's like the most powerful metaphor I've stumbled upon personally for the paranormal, honestly. For me personally, like, I'm not saying everybody should feel that way, but like, this idea of the fourth wall break, and metalepsis is the technical narratological term.
Right.
It just feels, I'm reading these books, and I'm like, you could totally swap out paranormal for metalepsis, and it reads exactly the same as Trickster and the Paranormal or something.
That's a good little opening gambit. Before we kind of jump in and pick apart some of these concepts, I do want to just tell you that we have, on my Patreon, we have this wonderful Discord going, and I was so pleased to find that there's a handful of people who have been kind of in recovery right now, or have been in recovery, and how the opening of the book really moved them. And I was so moved to see that it is one of these things, like the opening of the book, you come out with your heart on your sleeve, and I was like, wow, you're coming out very courageous, and I applaud you for that. But also, I want to say, I think it means something. It means something to people, man. I think it's helpful.
Well, I appreciate that, and I there are a couple of reasons for that. I think number one, there was so much. Some of the stories from that period of my life, in 2020, I checked myself into rehab for alcoholism. That's the background for anybody who's not aware. There are so many experiences and the flavor of that time in my life that I had recorded in some journals, but I really wanted to sort of bring into a little bit more of a permanent space. I know that journals are permanent, but cleaning day sometimes.
Right.
I'm tossing things out. Well, if it's in a book, if I lose the book, I can, get myself.
There's a record of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So sort of to preserve that and to show how, I make no bones about it. I survived because I focused in rehab on what do archetypal forms show me about what I should be doing and what I got wrong. And, I know it's tired at this point, but what would Joseph Campbell have said about my missteps,
Yeah.
And to find sort of strength in that place of journaling. At some point I might, I don't know, maybe the book already exists, but at some point I might literally write, a guide to recovery through Campbell and Jung. It was such a powerful experience for me. And it really, I think, it puts a spotlight on how tangible and applicable and these things pop up in your lives, and they have real world consequences. And it also is an opportunity for me to sort of be able to introduce myself. Hold on.
Oh, is that a little? Is that a little Cutch?
Yeah,
No problem. I'll vamp. Folks, we're not going to edit this out. Josh is going to go tend to his little child who's having a moment. He's got to be Papa Cutch sometimes, and we have to share him with the world. So here he is. He's back,
All
baby.
Right. Sorry about that.
No, that's part of the flavor.
Hearing these like,
he just broke the fourth wall of this podcast.
The little Cutchlings are breaking the fourth wall. So it sort of introduces me first person through the back door, and then at that point it's like, well, it's silly to sort of like take myself out of it, but to really provide a testament for like how powerful these things can be and how they can, it's one thing to read like, oh, you're the author of your own life, and it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? How do I apply that? And I think that's sort of at least a case study in how it has worked for me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that everything goes my way.
Yeah.
But as the book illustrates, being an author doesn't necessarily mean you're in control of everything either. It just means that you shape and guide the forces that are
Mm-hmm.
dictating the story, right? So that was really important for me to have in there, and just to sort of illustrate some of those synchronicities that I had in my life, which were pretty nuts around that time.
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple of ways to look at it, not the least of which is that like I made a sacrifice. I had a sort of death and rebirth thing going on. Interestingly enough, I have a dear friend who's in the book, Laura, who is an astrologer, and she's been working on this fascinating project, and I cannot wait for her to finish it because she's found a near-death experience marker in people's birth charts.
Interesting.
Right, and it's really there. I'm not going to spoil what she's discovering, but it does speak to this idea that like your near-death experience was fated. And she's found it not only in near-death experiencers, but also in people who write about near-death experiences. And guess who has that? Because I wrote Ecology of Souls.
Mm-hmm.
But guess who she sort of has also found, like, what people's charts look like around the time of their near-death experiences. And mine was like a crosshairs over August.
Really?
Late August 2020. Yeah. And so the way that she has interpreted it is that, like, oh, Josh, you chose the voluntary way of having this experience rather than the involuntary way, the way that's out of your control. And I'm still sitting with like the implications of that because it's pretty wild.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
And I would have to say, I think probably choosing the involuntary way, maybe potentially a better way to go. If you can afford yourself that opportunity.
I mean, when you get the option of carrot or stick, always choose the carrot, right?
They're tastier.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to, if you could, I mean, I know this is a pretty basic question, but can you explain, like, what actually, like, even if you want to use theatrical terms, I have an example of myself breaking the fourth wall in a show.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, what is breaking the fourth wall?
So the term actually originates from the theater, where this the idea you have the proscenium, you have the two, the either end of the stage right and stage left, and you have the backdrop, and then there's an invisible fourth wall separating the actors on stage from the audience. And it was originally this idea of like, oh, you must act as if there is a fourth wall. You don't see the audience. You're sort of disconnected. But what it came to mean was this concept of there being this sort of artificial separation between the audience and the actors on stage. And obviously that gets applied to all sorts of media. But the term actually is metalepsis, is the term that narratologists use. And my God, Steve, like there are books upon books. There's debate about what constitutes metalepsis and what doesn't. Like it's kind of like this edgy, heated new topic, and you can see why because it's all over our media nowadays. Fourth wall breaks where characters will acknowledge the audience, but like it can be top down where the narrator acknowledges the characters, or it can be bottom up where the character acknowledges the narrators, or it can be sort of lateral and out from character to audience, or I know Black Mirror had a sort of choose your own adventure style Netflix thing, so that would be a form of metalepsis where the audience is dictating the story. Crossover events, something as simple as an actor looking at the camera is a fourth wall break, but they turn into these like almost like fractal sort of stories within stories are kind of related to these concepts, and it's this huge narratological idea, and it's been around for a lot longer than the theater.
Right.
There's some early some early novels from the 1700s that they say, oh, well, this is an example of metalepsis because, like, there are some things where it says, shut the door, and, like, the next page is a picture of a door, like, sort of that sort of blending, breaking down the boundary between fact and fiction. But what I find interesting, what I find absolutely fascinating, and this is the moment, like, there's a moment whenever I'm working on a book where I'm like, oh, this has teeth. Like, there is something to this. I'm not just like, this isn't my apophenia of seeing patterns where there aren't, like, this. There's something to this. And I found an essay on metalepsis, on fourth wall breaks, in Grecian pottery. And this was the one where I was like, oh, okay. So if you imagine a Grecian urn, the figures, the characters on the vase are almost always shown in profile, with a few exceptions. And those exceptions are sleepers, the dead, people who are, symposiists, which means drinkers, they're in an altered state of consciousness, deities, specific animals like panthers.
Interesting.
And monsters. And as opposed to being shown in profile, these are most often shown face on the Grecian urns. So they're actually looking at the person who is looking at the urn.
Oh my god.
And that list is like the list of, like, that's the go-to list of things that make this fourth wall break between our reality and this other reality, right? Sleepers, people in altered states of consciousness, the dead, deities, and monsters. Like, these are the things that seem capable of sort of acknowledging and crossing the boundaries between these two spaces. And I just find that to be really fascinating, that art from way back when, for ancient Greece, would reflect that. And a lot of the book is focused on sort of these Western perspectives, but I saved some of these indigenous perspectives for the end, and they're even more. I think they have even greater implications for, like, sort of how we've erected this false boundary between fact and fiction.
Right.
Having said that, it's a weird space to live in. Like, you can't. Like, I found myself towards the end of this book being like, well, who cares if this story is true or not, or who cares if this person said this or didn't, in these accounts. That's not a way to write future books about the paranormal.
Right, I hear you.
So, like, you kind of have to go there and you kind of have to be like, okay, well, this might be what it's like, but you kind of have to retreat a little bit. And you do sort of wind up in this sort of loosey-goosey territory. But I think that's a place to, it's a place to have your heart, but not necessarily have your mind. Like, your mind sort of needs to deal with facts, and, Steve and Josh share a consensus reality, so I can't be like, no, I didn't eat the last Dorito, Steve. No,
we have to operate in a world. The
Dorito was imaginal. Like, I can't do that.
Well, like you kind of put, I'm sorry, you talk about the frame a lot, and you and I, right now, as we're talking, we're living within the frame.
Yeah, I mean, I've got
we have to accept rules.
My head right now.
I mean, literally, we're in the frame right now. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so, and this is something that that any sort of art does, right? Is it has to sort of operate and occupy a frame or a space, or else it's hard. It just becomes life,
Right.
And so I think that is important to sort of really engage with those. As I say towards the end of the book too. Even if you've convinced yourself that reality is so malleable that you can jump off the roof and fly, like, please don't jump off the roof. Like, don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Again, this is a place for your heart to live.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a place for your head to live.
That's a great way of putting it, I think. I think that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, I probably should have said it that way in the book, although I didn't. I just
that feels like abundantly implied to me.
Well, and that sort of speaks to one of the mantras of the book, which is that a lot of the things that I say and a lot of the opinions that I come to are this mantra is felt, not deduced. Like, does this feel right to me? Right. No, it does. Yes, it. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does.
Well, that also speaks to art. Art, like, I mean, like, you can critique it, we can talk about it, but, like, to me, at the end of the day, great art is felt, not discussed.
Right. That's the thing that I think is gonna save the artists from the AI apocalypse. Is that I cannot imagine a scenario, and if one ever exists, it'll be decades down the road, I think, where art makes a truly where AI makes a truly unorthodox choice, where they make an unintuitive decision.
Yeah.
When they have such a personal quirk that Guillermo del Toro's movies all feature cogs and clocks in some capacity, like, that's a voice, you know. That
it
is a
is.
voice, and
It is.
you know, you can train it on to style, but it's always going to be sort of a simulacrum of the real thing. So I think I think embracing the strangeness and the randomness and the quirkiness, and those things where it's like, this feels right. It doesn't make any sense, but this feels right.
Right.
That's where we can still hold on to a shred of our humanity as creators in this current apocalypse.
Well, and you do a great job of pointing out something that I actually never really kind of like thought about, but like it's like in a film, like in a love story, let's for example, like let's say one of the characters dies, and we feel the emotion. Right. We're actually crying, yet we know what we're watching is not real. It is fiction. Yet what we're feeling is more real than real.
Right. And you know, I puzzle over this because, like, where do we draw the boundary between something being real and not? And I know this sounds kind of like a sophomore in college bong rip, but, you know, it's that question of, if I can think myself into anxiety or calm or arousal, if I can use my mental faculties to create some sort of physical reaction in my own body, then the things in my head have some sort of objective component to them, right?
Yeah.
And you see this in the news too. I mean, like there are these researchers who are starting to sort of create imagery of from people's dreams. Like they can sort of extract imagery and such. And it's like, okay, well, that means that there's something there. Like there's something. Yeah. And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not saying that it's not whole cloth, and I'm not saying that's sorry, I'm not saying that it's not I'm not saying that it necessarily doesn't have us playing a role in its creation, but I think that, like, the fact that we have this imagery every time we go to sleep at night says that there is something to it that has an objectivity that I think we should really reappreciate. And if that's the case, then what happens to those things, those thoughts that I have?
Right.
And what happens to those characters that seem to come in waves of effortless inspiration to creators? And why couldn't they pop off the screen or off the page and into our lives for just a fleeting moment? I mean, so I said that I wasn't going to talk about the indigenous stuff because I was kind of saving it for this spoilery thing. But a quick one that I just find I really resonate with is Dr. Daniel Everett, who is a scholar who worked closely with the Piraha tribe in the Amazon, was talking about a concept that they have that's ibupio. And this concept of ibupio is basically like their qualifier for how they obtain information. So, you know, I saw him leave in a canoe. I heard about him leaving in a canoe. I deduced that he left in a canoe. Like, all these things have that ibupio qualifier, and there's like a fractal number of expressions that this can, you know, conjugations and such. But he said that, you know, he treated the Piraha as the sort of ultimate empiricist because of this, and he ended up losing his religion. But the funny thing is that the Piraha, you know, they believe in spirits. You know, there's an anecdote that I share in the book where, like, one of his primary teacher of the culture is on the shore, and he's like, "Don't you see that, you know, the sky spirit is going to be mad at you and kill you if you go into the jungle?" And so he really tries to wrestle with, like, how does this people that value lived experience above all else sort of reconcile the idea of a spirit world. And I think, to me, it's pretty simple. Like the Ibupiu concept, he talks about one time his flashlight was dead, so he had a match, and he lit the match, and people, as the match flickered, some of his friends were saying, "Oh, the match is Ibupiuing," like the match is coming in and out of existence.
Oh,
I think that's such a handy way to talk about these things. It's like, it's like, just because they're real in one moment doesn't mean that they're real in the next, right?
Right.
It's like, you know, if somebody said, "Is the tornado real?" You're like, well, I mean, tornadoes, I mean, not right now.
No,
You know?
that's exactly right.
There's no tornado real right now. But when one happens, that doesn't mean that it isn't real. And when it disappears, it doesn't mean it wasn't real. It is real in that moment, in that sort of fleeting moment. And I think I love the way that takes the pressure off these ideas of proof.
Right.
I love the way that idea, if we sort of can incorporate that, explains how these things can be there one moment and not the next. and be very real one moment and not the next. I think that that's at least at the very least a good thought experiment for us to engage in. And similarly, like that kind of seems to be what our thoughts are in some ways. Like they can be very real one moment and not real at all the next.
Oh my Lord. That the whole match analogy, that is wonderful.
Yeah,
that's great to hear.
Yeah, and so a lot of what Fourth Wall Phantoms is a lot of ideas that a lot of things I've collected over the past 10 years that have sort of like stuck in my head, and I'm like, this has something to do with this phenomenon, but I don't know where to put it. And then when the muse strikes, again, the story of Fourth Wall Phantoms is the story in Fourth Wall Phantoms, right? It was like, oh, this is the place for all those things to live. Like, this is the place for all these ideas to live, and these sort of orphaned ideas that I've had over the past 10 years. It's a home for them to stay. That's a lot of the book is.
I think for the listeners, it would be good, and you've definitely, I think, kind of defined it in just talking about metalepsis and stuff, but like, just like the most basic 101, what is a fictional incursion? Because fictional incursions are very important in this book.
Right, and that's a term that I think I coined.
I had never heard before. I actually Googled it. I was like, fictional incursion, nothing came up, and I was like, okay, you made that up.
I think it's mine. Yeah. So fictional incursion is the idea that is the term that I use to refer to an element, be it a character or an event or a theme or something slipping from fiction into reality. So it can be something as specific as someone seeing Spider-Man creeping over a wall in Washington State, or it can be as sort of vague and loose as the way that the UFO phenomenon seems to adopt and adapt to our cultural expectations, right? Which it certainly seems to do. You've got wonders in the sky that go into the airships, that go into the UFO, that go into the triangles, that go into, I called it, drones, right?
Right.
I called this with Red Pill Junkie like years ago. I'm like, we're gonna start seeing drones. Like that's the new shape of the UFO. And it's like, no, and here we are.
Unfortunately.
I mean, yeah, and it's one of those things I don't know. I think a lot of the drones in late 2024 were terrestrial, but the idea of UFO and drone are sort of synonymous in American public thought. So anyway, but it can also be like, these sort of things, these aspects from the pulp magazines that the UFO phenomenon seems to have pulled on. And this is the work of scholars like Bertrand Mayust, who have showed that, like, there are antecedents. The problem with that is, like, you end up in this this chicken and the egg sort of game.
Right.
Another scholar that I really admire is Martin Kottmeyer. Kottmeyer showed that, like, the idea of an intergalactic visitor coming to Earth and their very presence interfering with electronics originated in fiction. It appears in pulps before it appears in UFO encounters. But with some of these other ideas, like the shape of gray aliens, people will say, oh, that's from Communion, or that's from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'll point to earlier UFO sightings that sort of prefigure that, that seem to sort of suggest that. And then I'm sure somebody else will come out with some film, and then I'll point to some fairy descriptions that seem to indicate that as well. And then I think what happens is you wind up at petroglyphs, right? Like, you wind up at like this thing, and like, is that art? Is that a representation of reality? Or is it so far back in time and created by people who didn't have those distinctions that it really doesn't matter if it was art or reality, right? Right. And that's where I think you wind up with a lot of this stuff. Naturally, the subject of fictional incursions invites discussion of retrocausality. Yes. I think the world of Eric Wargo's work, hopefully that comes through in the book.
Absolutely. And I agree. Time Loops was a big book for me. But.
Yeah, and I sat down with Eric and I was like, I'm going to be challenging some of these ideas. I love your work. I think you've nailed a significant portion of this. I just don't think it's everything. So I sat down and had an interview with him to sort of get a sense of some ideas and clarify some of my thinking around him and stuff. But anyway, so retrocausality is part of this too, because like if something happens in fiction and then it happens in real life, then, well, was that the person sort of retrocausally hearing about this or reading this or experiencing? Mm-hmm. I do think that there are examples where people who don't live to see the real world event that resembles their fiction die. You know, they die, and so they wrote about something that happens after their death. And if retrocausality is predicated on someone pre-membering something that they hear in the future or that they learn in the future, then you're not pre-membering something after you die, right? Like, so I think that there's some places where we can sort of hash out the details, but I think retrocausality is part of this. But what it really points to is this sort of everywhere, every when. I think,
Yeah.
And that's why I think, you know, it's kind of funny. I was at an event in 2023 where I had the pleasure of meeting Mike Masters. Great guy.
Yeah.
His idea sounds very different than Ecology of Souls, right? It's like people from the future coming back.
Time travelers. Yeah, yeah,
and I'm like, no, it's the dead. But I'm like, but then I had this conversation with him. I'm like, we're kind of talking about the same thing, just from different angles. Like, it's the same idea, right? The idea that we're in this moment of the present, and we're at a convergence point between the past and the future, right? And similarly, I would argue that Eric's work is a lot like that with me and Fourth Wall Phantoms. Like, we're both approaching this idea of simultaneity, of everywhere and every when.
Yeah.
But we're just doing it from different angles. And it's almost like he's doing it from a temporal perspective, and I'm doing it from like a content perspective.
Right.
But I think we're sort of on a trajectory. We're sort of zeroing in on the same concept, I think.
I would also say, like, there's a very an emotional, human emotion perspective from Fourth Wall Phantoms too. That
Right.
I think that's why I'm more comfortable, perhaps, with Fourth Wall Phantoms than I am retrocausality. Because I read Time Loops, I loved it. It was kind of like the Eighth Tower John Keel, where after I read it, I was like troubled for a few days. You know, because the Eighth Tower by Keel is like kind of his most like negative book in a lot of ways, it's like it'll mess you up a little bit. And I felt the same way about Time Loops, and I say that in a loving way. I feel like everyone should read it. It's a great book, but it did trouble me a little bit. You know?
No, I totally understand that. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, I feel like it's a bit like the dichotomy between myself and my wife. Like, she's good with numbers, and I can't remember numbers to save my life. You know,
same.
And so I think it is a bit like that. And yeah, I mean, like, I think there's a, you know, if you talk to Eric, like, he's very, I don't get the sense that he sort of views this as a sort of a fatalistic sort of thing. In fact, he goes at pains to sort of dismiss that. But yeah, that's the thing about some of these. So I think that there's sort of my hope is that Fourth Wall Phantoms is a hopeful book, right?
It is. Like, okay. I want to tell you, like, I felt gleeful.
Okay, well, yeah, and you know, I remember when I sent you the trailer that I did for it. Which, go check out the trailer, folks. It's fun.
It's so great.
But I remember cutting that trailer, all done by me.
It's so good.
And I was like, I feel really emotional. Like, this feels like really personal, and this feels like it's sort of important in that sort of way to me. And so, yeah, so the tone that I realized, like, it is my voice, but the tone I sort of realized in retrospect is that it's kind of like if Keel had the outlook of a Jeff Kripal. Like, that's kind of the tone of Fourth Wall Phantoms, you know?
Right, that's a good way of putting it.
Because, you know, I think Jeff is a pretty hopeful guy in his writing at the end of the day. But, yeah, I mean, I think that, and in some ways, like, again, it just comes back to it being a very personal book. Like, you know, I have just... It's probably the best snapshot of, like, my inner religious life.
Yeah.
My inner spiritual life that I've made public, and but I think that's where you go with this stuff, because you cannot separate as much as I'm sympathetic to the idea of death of the artist, right? And I do think there's something to that, the idea of the art standing on its own merits and standing on its own, and the art sort of bringing in things that the author never intended, right? That happens.
Right.
At the same time, like, separating the two out, like, it comes from a point of view, and it comes from a perspective, and Fourth Wall Phantoms is not the exception.
That's amazing, Josh. You know, one, like, kind of this thought I had the entire way through the book, and I mean, this was not my own thought. It was, you know, promoted by you throughout your, you know, use of comparing cinema to high strangeness and UFO encounters. But it feels like to me, whatever, like, you know, and obviously we lack a perfect phrase for this, but the phenomenon feels like a studio head of, like, MGM or, like, you know, Columbia Pictures. And that every generation they start auditioning new characters, a la like in the 60s and 70s, how we would see all kinds of different humanoids, and then in the late 70s, the gray alien got the role and it got the part, and it played the part for a few decades, and now we might be in the auditioning phase again of
yeah. I mean, I think that you're really touching on something here. And you do see these trends through Hollywood, right?
Yes.
The way that the Westerns were the thing, and then
absolutely, yeah.
As the interstate system pops up, the Western dies.
And right now we're in the most. I mean, I'm sorry just to cut you off, but I feel like we're in the most dystopian time of mass media, because all it is remakes and reinterpretations of the stuff we watch as children, where I'm like, I want new stories. Why are we redoing the same stories? And I feel like it's bad for the world when stories are boring and bad.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing too where it's not only that, but it's like this constant cycle of deconstruction that we're swept up in. You and I may have talked about this, but look, I love The Boys, I love Watchmen, I love movies where the princess saves herself from the dragon, right? I love all that. But those don't work without the backdrop of cheesy ass superheroes. They don't work without the backdrop of the knight, being the hero in a story.
Right.
Every now and then. We've got to have a good balance of those things.
Sure.
And I think between that and the remake idea, the remake trend, honestly, dude, legacy sequels are worse than remakes, I think. Because there's this fealty to what came before, where it's like, well, we can't go against, continuity here, and it's like, just make something new.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to turn this into the movie podcast, but hopefully, what we're looking at is like sort of a 1970s cinema landscape where some really interesting stuff gets to come out that's not as big budget. But
that's exactly right.
But I think that there are these trends that sweep through, filmmaking. So Westerns, and I hate to say it, but the superheroes are kind of over.
Yeah.
I just none of the films are really hitting like they have.
No.
So I think that you're right that we're in the midst of a sea change, and I think that, again, to bring it back to the discussion of the drones last year, I think that was not only do I think that could qualify as a flap, regardless of whether or not it was UFOs.
Absolutely.
That was one of those moments, where we saw the UFO update its software. We've got a new shape, new UFO shape just dropped.
Here's the pilot episode. Do you guys like it or not?
And this is something that I keep putting out there on some of my podcasts, because I'm interested in gathering more information, because I think it's going to force us to sort of reevaluate a lot of stuff. Is that abductions are really, really down.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that there aren't experiencers and people aren't having contact and they aren't having direct, meaningful contact. It's just that the idea of we take you what seems to be bodily, we take you and we take you apart and put you back together again, and then we drop you back home.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen as much nowadays.
No.
It's much more about pardon, I know this is a loaded word, but it's much more about communion. It's much more about consciousness. It's much more about getting downloads. It's much more about
yes.
It feels much more consensual in sort of like a contactee sort of way.
Right.
Than it used to. And I wonder what that is, if that's another update, or if it's or if we got the message and we're moving on to a new phase.
Yeah.
Or if we didn't get the message and a new method is being tried. I don't know, but I think that that's really important, really interesting that is coinciding with the software update of the UFO. I think it's interesting that that's coinciding with a surge in popularity, that these are us from the future. I think it's interesting that that's coinciding with AI.
Yeah.
I don't like talking about AI like it's the be all end all. I mean, obviously it has extreme implications for us, but I've said this a couple of times. I kind of wonder if the new face of the UFO phenomenon isn't, the narrative doesn't become, the AI bots came out of their underground server farms and they took me to download my consciousness. If that's not what the UFO phenomenon looks like moving forward, because it feels like we're overdue for an update.
I think we are too. I think we're in the auditioning phase. And one thing that I find interesting is that as everyone, this is probably a subjective point of view, but I feel like maybe not. I think it's safe to say, like, at least in my lifetime, this is the craziest the world has ever been, right?
Yeah,
On multiple levels.
Well, and,
right?
yeah.
And I feel like to me, it's interesting that, I guess, and this is from my point of view, many people disagree with me, that UFOs have never been more boring. Which is interesting to me. Is like, as like the times get crazier, UFOs get more mundane, and they're Tic Tacs now, like in drones. Like it's disappointing. I would have hoped that, and obviously I can't make things true, but like that the phenomenon would just like kind of like raise its weird quotient as things got. It
kind of reminds me of an old joke that's like, sex is only important when you don't have access to it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So it's kind of like, the UFOs are only interesting when they're not everywhere. Like when they are kind of, yeah, I really don't know what to make of it. I mean, I think that this whole disclosure season has been successful, but there's, and you know this as well. There's an esoteric and an exoteric version of the disclosure movement. And it's really been really interesting to see that esoteric side bleeding in at the fringes a little bit more.
Yeah.
Talking about the discussion has shifted towards consciousness and human potential inside in a way that I never thought would.
Right.
I don't know if anything's going to come of that, but that's interesting to see to me.
Yeah.
And so that might be part of the update or part of the auditioning process too. Like I just don't know.
Well, and it's interesting to see too that people are actually more open to a non-ETH extraterrestrial hypothesis idea of the UFO phenomenon than ever.
Yeah, and this is something that I should probably sort of highlight. I think that we said this about Fourth Wall Phantoms being a book very much of this era, right?
Yeah.
And because my joke is like, think about the person that you didn't vote for in the last election, and now they're president, and they're telling you that UFOs are real. Do you believe them?
Right.
The answer is no across the board. Like, the answer is no. Nobody.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I think that this is very much a book of its time, but I think these are trickster times. Like, these are trickster times, and we see fourth wall breaks more than ever. Like, they're everywhere. Deadpool and Wolverine is a testament to how popular this idea is.
Absolutely.
So, like, I think that's part of this, too. I have people, the number of people, I distinctly remember this day in my aftercare, for rehab, like, talking with one of my therapists, and I was like, of course, the topic comes up, and you're like, oh, God, they want to talk about UFOs, so now we're going to spend, 20 minutes talking them off the ETH pedestal, come down from the ledge there. And I'm like, well, I said, yeah, I'm into UFOs, but I really don't think that they're aliens. And the guy goes, oh no, I think they're interdimensional. It's like, what? Like, yeah. Like, would that have happened? Like, would that conversation have gone down like that 15 years ago?
Not a chance.
Because this is not a paranormal nerd. Like, this is just a person off the street.
Yeah, when you start, accepting, I guess. It is kind of one of those weird things. It's like, first you believe in the ETH, and then you move to the interdimensional thing, and then after the interdimensional thing, it's like the Wild West, where, you go off on your own and figure out what it means to you. Where I feel like that's where I am right now, where I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I think it's way weirder than all these ideas.
And I think that's sort of a good way to describe Fourth Wall Phantoms. Is like this is. I'm not trying to like blow up its importance, but like this is the frontier, and this is the Wild West, and this is that uncharted territory. You can go there if you want to. This is what I've seen through my binoculars. Like, this is right. This is what the paranormal Lewis and Clark have come back to tell me. I don't know if you want to go there. I'm like, I know that exists, and I'm happy knowing that exists. I'm gonna kind of stay over here.
Right.
But, so I think that's sort of, again, part of the reason that the timing just feels right, and that we are in these trickster times.
It feels so very right. In fact, like, this book is almost like, this makes it sound boring, but like an instruction manual you want to keep in your back of your pocket.
Yeah.
When you are looking at all these phenomena in high strangeness in general, like that's what I was saying. Like, I generally don't highlight a lot of books, Fortean books. But I highlight all these books not because I'm going to write a research paper, or I even plan on, being able to drop these awesome concepts and discussion at the bar. This is for myself,
Right.
for helping me understand this, because this is a personal journey for me, and it has been since I was a little kid, where I'm like, well,
that means I think you're doing it right.
I think I'm doing it right. This is my personal like hero's journey, and I've chose the path of the weird as my as my movie. And this book is like it's like a filmmaking guide for a director. It's like, for me, I needed this book so bad right now, because I feel like sometimes I can spin my wheels and where I'm like, it's fun to rehash Keel all the time, and you can talk about Keel forever. But at a certain point, I'm like, I don't know, like
Right.
like we can only get so far with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a lot of ways, it's not necessarily like I've written out a prescription for anything, but it's just a lot of this book was permission for me to enjoy urban legends.
Yes.
Again, to enjoy tall tales again.
Right.
And to give them some way of like, it's an urban, because I've run into this like twice at ghost conferences now, right? Where they're like, somebody asks, what's the least true story that you've run into? And like somebody's like, the woman in white. And I'm like, okay, my dude, like,
yeah.
archetypes.
Yeah.
If you want to go, whenever I have raise my objections, it's like they want to say thought forms. I'm like, okay, I'll let you have that. Like, you can have that. Sure, thought forms. But like, it's the idea that, like, again, Ibu right?
Yep.
There's no basis for a woman in white having died, on her way to the altar and in her wedding gown, and everybody who's ever seen it has lied, and yet I totally believe you when you saw it when you went to that cemetery.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that the woman in white isn't real. It means that she occupies this sort of weird, loosey-goosey space, between these things. And so, like, part of that, was sort of like, permission to sort of engage with these things that way. I'm like, just meaning making, which is art, right? Art is meaning making, personal myth making. I mean, I think back to that wonderful night that we had in Chapel Hill, Tennessee.
Yeah, right.
Where we went to the spot of the ghost light, and we didn't really see anything, and then we went to another spot that I had somebody had said was another good spot to see it, and I don't know if that spot has any reputation for that at all. But there was enough, like, just sort of, it wasn't
there
like
was some
anything
weird
undeniable,
stuff,
but just a little bit odd, and it was like this we all had this, like, shared, again, space of coming together and making meaning around that, and I think that's magic. I mean,
I think so too.
That's so cheesy to say, but it's a magical moment. And I think,
but we were all elated in like, kind of like, like almost like shouting like children. We're like, look at the light in the little forest. I mean, like, I was like, probably sound like an 8-year-old,
Well,
like,
what was so weird for me is I saw the light through the trees, and I looked and we saw that weird sort of stair step light.
Yeah.
And then I looked over, I think it was over Lucinda's shoulder, and there was like, as soon as I turned to say something to her, like, there's a shooting star, and it was like boom, 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 and it was like a weird. And I think that if we're dealing with a reality that changes a lot more and does have this sort of observer effect and sort of sits in a state of indeterminacy until you ascribe some sort of purpose and meaning to it, like, that's when moments like that for me are like, oh, this is coming together, and this, for a moment, I've sidestepped into something else.
Yes.
And then I step back into it. And these again, these are more interesting questions to me than, what were the size of the burn marks in the ground?
What's the propulsion of the craft? Well, I feel like this book, what it does, which is so very much for me, it luxuriates in the weird. It doesn't breeze past it, which that's a big problem for me in, like, kind of the history of. I've read so many UFO books at this point. It's almost embarrassing. But the vast majority of those books do is, like, maybe if they're honest, they'll address that there were some weird aspects to a situation. But this book takes those weird aspects and it pulls up a lazy boy chair, pulls up a nice bowl of pretzels and a soft drink. And it says, like, no, we're going to sit in this for a little while. We're going to luxuriate, kick our feet up, and live in the weird. And for me, I'm like, it's what I've been waiting for. Even Valet books, it's like he addresses it, he touches upon it, but he doesn't luxuriate it in it as much as this book did. And for me,
Right.
I'm like, this is what it's all about. Like the weird stuff is the draw, baby.
Yeah, but I didn't want to just luxuriate in it. Like I think you can luxuriate in it and extrapolate like a purpose behind that, like
For
a purpose
sure.
behind that absurdity, and that sort of was what the chapter on high strangeness and surrealism was sort of driving at. The idea that high strangeness exists in these contexts to accomplish the same goals that the surrealist art movement does, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's part of what I wanted to do too. And yeah, I just I feel like there's so much that we can pull out from that. Are you getting a really low thumb? Are you hearing
I'm
that?
not.
Okay. I was just making sure that that's somebody's doing something on my street, and I just want to
Oh
make sure
no,
that
it doesn't come at all.
through. So yeah, I just think that there's space for this, and at the end of the day, I just write books that I want to read.
Yeah, that's it.
And there are certain people who are along, on the journey with me, in the back of my head. So every time I wrote about Herbert Schirmer,
oh, thank you.
I was like, oh, Steve's gonna like this part, but that's. That anecdotal quote, like, we want you to believe in us, but not too much.
It's huge.
That's what I think this is.
I agree.
And like maybe they didn't say that. I don't care. It still is. Even if they didn't say it, it's all the more appropriate.
Then Herbert Schirmer was a very advanced person. Then it doesn't matter if that's the thing. It's like the Herbert Schirmer case is a perfect example, folks. I think I've probably talked about it quite a bit. But 1967, Herbert Schirmer was a police officer. Saw a UFO parked parked on the side of the road. Then later, through regression, remembered some experiences on the ship, and he had that amazing quote that the UFO nod said, "And it's we want you to believe in us, but not too much." Now, whether or not, I believe Herbert Schirmer's story up to the point that it actually happened to him, where he saw the craft. The regression stuff, that's all up in the air. I'm not saying it didn't happen or it did happen,
right?
But that becomes unimportant to me at a certain point.
Well, and if you take the core message of Fourth Wall Phantoms, it is unimportant because,
exactly.
An idea that our mutual friend Red Pill Junkie has talked about is this idea that regressions aren't useful for retrieving the memories, which seems to be the case, but there is a space that you're going to as you're sitting on the couch,
right?
There's a space that your consciousness is going to, and if we're existing in this state of simultaneity, then maybe that what didn't happen like that or wasn't said like that, but you are contacting that same intelligence that is sort of giving you flavor of the. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting way to look at things, I think.
Yeah, it's also it's almost like Mad Libs. It's like where you're putting in some of
the
the words. There's a framework ish, and then you help round out the story. But I also I want to ask you about this. In art, threes are very important, right? There's the rule of threes in comedy. There's the rule of thirds in photography. There's the 3-act structure to most narratives. Why threes? Do you have any idea? And I was trying to think of an example in High Strangeness or the Phenomenon, whatever you want to call it. Is there a 3 component with High Strangeness that you've ever been able to notice?
I mean, I feel like there is. I mean, there's a lot of you got 3 humps for Nessie, and you've got three points of light on the triangle, and
right, and the tripod's usually a 3.
And again, there's a substantial portion of this book makes the argument that we should treat fairy tales more seriously, and 3 is the number of all fairy tales.
Right.
Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's so many different examples of 3 having sort of a sacredness. I think that there is something interesting about that you can maybe pull out about beginning, middle, and end. I think there's something interesting that you could pull out about a triangle being the most stable shape. And pyramids.
Right.
I think all these things probably speak to this idea that we have sort of had a fascination with 3 and the 3 and 1. But I don't know. I will say that there's a reason that I chose myself and 2 friends to go looking for Bigfoot.
Exactly.
Let's conjure up this 3-ness.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean that is something that I think is really worth exploring. It's but that's the problem with exploring this stuff with an idea like that in mind is because as soon as you like start saying, "Oh, this seems to be a thing," you'll start finding ones that it's like, "Oh, here were 7 lights," and
yeah, you're right.
Here were 4 beings that came out of the craft. You know,
will self-negate.
yeah, well, yeah, and that's a big part of it. So yeah, and a lot of this book is sort of looking at that sort of trickster in the paranormal, self-negating sort of aspect, but also, you know, one of the more, because I don't know, there's I you know, I adore that book, like,
yeah, I do too.
You know, and I think the world of it. There is sort of like a pessimism that I feel that runs through that book.
Yeah.
And sort of this was an idea to sort of like take one of Hanson's more optimistic ideas and sort of run with it, which is the idea that like by kindling the imagination, the imaginal, which is like a more real version of the imagination, steps in to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, a substantial part of this book is looking at, you know, how hoaxes can cause genuine phenomenon.
By the way, I love that part.
Hoaxes are stories, hoaxes are fictions.
Yeah.
And so there really is nothing that different between somebody who writes a story about a fictional character that pops into real life and somebody who makes up a story about a UFO that ends up actually triggering real phenomenon to happen. There's a fun example of like before Adamski's photos were outed as fakes, someone on the Isle of Wight saw a UFO and sketched it, and it looked like an Adamski scout ship.
Right.
And then were later outed as fakes. She said that she had not seen any of the photos either.
Right.
So it's like, what is that? You know, somebody who saw the Ed Walters Gulf Breeze UFO that was the one that was revealed to be a model. What was that? Oh, well, they were just making it up. Well, I don't know, man. A
lot of people saw it. There was a lot of witnesses.
Well, and I think that we overestimate how many people are liars. I think there are a lot of people who are like, I'll give you misidentifications, I'll give you confusions, I'll give you wishful thinking, I'll give you all that stuff. But like outright liars, people willing to capitalize on this stuff, I think we overestimate that way too much.
I think so too. I mean, you even just think about it in like almost like a monetary sense. Like it's like, people don't generally waste their time doing something unless they're going to get something out of it. That's just a human thing. Right. And I feel like with a lot of these stories and stuff like that, where people are like, oh, that couldn't be real. It's so crazy. I'm like, I don't know. I kind of believe it more. Like you point that out too. Like, you know, and Valet, you know, I think was the first person that I know of who kind of pushed this idea. He's like, you know, when a UFO experience sounds too organized and too much like Galactic Federation-y, then he almost dismisses it. But if it sounds like Daffy Duck, you know, came off a flying saucer, he's like, I believe those.
Well, I mean, you know, if you're going to want your story to be believed, you're going to come up with the most conventional narrative, right? You're not going to say that there was the gray alien was wearing a T-shirt that said "I Heart New York," right? Like, you're not going to do that.
Yes.
And that's part of why I love these stories. Like, not only is it just like so silly and absurd and funny and fun. Like, man, that story about Oscar Iriart being handed a letter from a...
Will you tell the story? Tell the story. Because, dude, this is literally... you showed this to me at Strange Realities last year, and I started crying laughing so hard.
It's one of my favorite stories. So, and apparently there's been a little bit of follow-up, and he believes that... He hasn't come away from the story. Some people are tending to doubt it now, but he has not stepped away from the story. But the long version of it, which I didn't include in Fourth Wall Phantoms, is a boy on a ranch in Argentina goes out to do some work. He runs into these 2 people who are transparent from the waist down, and they say, "You will know the world." And he says, "Well, yeah, one day when I'm older, I'll know the world." He's like, "No, you will know it now. You will come with us." "Wait, you cannot come with us. We have too much cargo." And then they hand him an envelope that they point to a mud puddle, so he runs it through the mud puddle and it doesn't get wet. He opens it up, and there's this letter that says, the UFO takes off. He goes back home and he opens up the letter and it says, "You will know the world. Signed, Flying Saucer."
Signed, Flying Saucer.
But it's more like it's more but it was P Volador, so it's more like S Flying or Flying S. Like, and this big block letters, "You will know the world, signed Flying Saucer." And there was a, you know, there were depressions at the landing site, and there was follow-up by local law enforcement who went out to that field and were buzzed by a strange light. Right. And this was also set against the backdrop of just sort of a South American UFO flap anyway. So it's like that, you know, you look at that, you can find pictures of the letter online. It's like, the kid totally wrote this. Like, but weird stuff seemed to have happened as well.
Yeah.
And that's such an example of sort of this pH of disbelief concept that I talk about, where it's like, it's got to be self-negating, it's got to be in that sort of plausible deniability framework, but it's got to like get enough people invested who are kind of interested, and like once you hit that sweet spot, that's where actual magic happens.
I really loved the pH of disbelief. That was really new to me, and I had that. Let's talk about that right now while we're on the topic.
Sure.
Do you mind? Like, yeah,
sure.
So I found that this was a whole really a new way of looking at it for me, where I was like, oh yes, wow, amazing. It's really like sat with me.
Well,
so please,
it's a bit like Valet's control system, right?
Uh-huh.
But I think there's a little bit more agency. There's a little bit more agency that sort of we have involved in this, which is if these things have to reside in a realm of disreputability to exist, right?
Yeah.
So it's that Herbert Sherman quote, right? We want you to believe in us, but not too much.
Right.
It is also, which I found fascinating, this underreported aspect of the Philip experiment, which was this ghost that was created from whole cloth that seemed to respond to questions from seance sitters.
Right.
And we could talk about whether or not it was a ghost or not, but there was a phenomenon that was generated by this fictional story of a ghost that answered questions about the ghost.
Yes.
Correctly. And it was said that when they took the whole endeavor of the Philip experiment too seriously, they didn't get good results. But when they were sort of joyful and like acting like almost familial, that's when they got the best results.
Right.
We don't want you to believe in us too much. Be joyful and sort of lighthearted about it. All these things point me in the direction of this idea of like, this what I call the pH of disbelief, which is that sweet spot, right? Where you're not dogmatic about it, you're not sure that these things exist. You're not completely sure that they don't exist. You're in this in-between space, and that happens at an individual level, that happens at a cultural level. But just like the pH of a body of water that has to be maintained perfectly for organisms to thrive, I think that something similar might be happening here. And it is that liminal space, it's that betwixt and between space where these things are allowed to come into reality. Another good example is something like psychic surgery, or shamanic surgery, sleight of hand surgery. Where people who are afflicted with a malady will go to see a psychic surgeon, and through sleight of hand, the surgeon will extract what appears to be a foreign object from their body, but the person gets better. It's like, the way that our culture glosses over the placebo effect just infuriates me. It's like, oh, that was just placebo. Like they thought
it was a sugar pill.
They thought they were feeling better, and so they ended up feeling better. And it's like, no, can you pause and like,
let's look into that more.
So that to me is the pH of disbelief, and that's why I think that hoaxes seem to be able to, well done hoaxes seem to be able to sort of coax out this sort of phenomena. I mean, another good example is crop circles, which are like works of art.
Yes.
Most of them, I think, are hoaxes. They are works of art, and yet people who are in the fields who will admit to creating them will say, yeah, we had missing time while we were out there. Yeah, we saw this light, buzz us while we were out there in the field.
Right.
Yeah, I woke up this morning with this image in my head and knew I had to go design it in the crop circle. Oh yeah, I picked a field at random to go make my crop circle, and there was another group of circle makers in the same field on the same day. It's just weird. It's just weird.
I mean, even Colin Andrews, I believe in the early 90s, he was kind of like the dude who was all over the crop circle thing in England. And, I think there's a story, I don't think the video is out there, but he took like a camera crew, a news crew out there, and they were standing in the middle of a crop circle at night, and, nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden, like, people in the crew felt like they were getting pushed around, and all of a sudden felt like freaked. It's an amazing story where, like, there were multiple people started feeling all this weird stuff. And it's like invisible force was out there. And so, like, that is a thing. It's like whether you like it or not, like, I'm with you. I think the vast majority of crop circles are done by brilliant artists. However, but there's also, like, the guy who was, like, kind of important in crop circles was, Mark Pilkington's partner, John, who co-directed, he co-directed Mirage Men. His whole thing is ostension. And it's funny. Nathan Isaac and I had a phone conversation about your book after we both read it, because him and I have been working on a project that heavily features ostension and hyperstition, and we were like, "Holy shit!" I mean, we were.
Yeah.
I wish you could have our conversation because the way. I mean, Nathan is an amazing thinker in these realms as well.
Yeah.
And Nathan was like, "This book is going to be a classic forever."
Oh, that's
like I don't know if you've talked to him. Nathan loves this book so much. Like because for what we've been talking, him and I have been talking about the last 18 months. This book, it was like, it almost feels magical that this book came out. It almost feels like a synchronicity for me.
Well, I'm gonna see Nathan later this year, so I'm sure it'll come up. But
get ready for an onslaught of compliments.
But yeah, I mean, like, and you know, there's so much about this. I mean, this thing wanted to be born. You know, I mean,
yeah.
Ren, our mutual friend Ren Collier, had such an important role to play in this, and one of those things was his talk on hyperstition in I guess that was 22 at Strange Realities.
An amazing talk too.
Like an emotion. Like I went back and listened to it again for this project. I'm like, it made me emotional to think about it. You know, well, let's all grow eyes on the inside.
Yep.
And then of course is what he said the next year, which was spirits are made of stories, and I just that was like everything clicking into my head. So like a big problem that I have with a lot of these fields is this assumption that like we're still trying to like shake off the phantom of materialism and physicalism, and it's taken a long time, but like the paranormalists are guilty of it too. Like ironically, like the parapsychologists probably have the best grasp on this, but like we're like, well, is the UFO physical or is it mental? You know, it's like, okay, let's not do that.
Right.
If psi phenomena exists, it's in your head, but it can actually affect the world around us or interact with the world around us. Ghosts seem to not be made of anything. Like, I can't punch a ghost. Well, in the classical world, you could. But
right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, they seem to be intangible, but they slam doors and they leave footprints and they do all this stuff.
Yep.
So let's apply that to Bigfoot, and what do you get? Let's apply that to the UFO, and what do you get? And I think that this fact-fiction duality that we see as a duality, that we see as a dichotomy, again, a lot of indigenous cultures have not felt that there's this dichotomy there, but we in the West, in the modernity, we've come up with this idea. This fact-fiction dichotomy that we see is the same as this physical non-physical dichotomy. It's the same as the physical mental dichotomy. It's all these things, and I think that like it's not. I think that very few things fall into one or the other category. I think a lot of things straddle the line.
Right.
And where I wind up with is I think that a lot of these phenomena, but let's just take the UFO specifically, I think that they're sort of a mirror image of human beings. Like, I'm physical. Like, if I don't eat, I mean, I could obviously not eat for a while and be okay because I'm a big boy, but if I don't eat, like, I'm going to suffer physical consequence.
Yes.
I'd say that I'm like, I don't know, 80-20 physical psychic, because there's a part of me that is psychic,
Yes.
Even if you don't have psychic talents, like you can think yourself calm, you can think yourself agitated, you can think yourself into arousal, like you are a part of you is psychic. 80-20, right? What if the UFO is like 20-80, right? Like what if the UFO is 20% physical and 80% psychic?
Right.
But it does that same sort of like stepping over the boundary that we do when we engage in this other side of ourselves. And what if UFOs are just really good lucid dreamers?
Right. Well, you know what's interesting. It seems like a lot of like Carl Jung. I wrote this essay, which was I guess turned into a book for us to read. But
turned into probably the greatest UFO book ever.
Honestly, yeah, it really is amazing. I remember the first time I read it years and years ago. I was like, ugh, I didn't like that. And then I wasn't ready for it then. That was a long time ago. And now I love it and I reread passages all the time. But it feels like he set up a lot of these ideas, but you really ran with it and examined it under a microscope. And I want to mention this too. There was a part in the book that I loved. It's about I think probably halfway point where you kind of congratulate people on the,
which is still like shy of halfway.
Well, to me it felt like an intermission. It's like, all right, go get up, go get popcorn,
right.
Refill your popcorn, go to the bathroom, have a cig, do whatever you're gonna do, and then you kind of say, the act of reading this book is a ritual. Thank you for participating. To some extent, I'm paraphrasing. And I loved that. And I was like, oh, the act of reading this book is a ritual. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons that I was originally drawn to this idea of metalepsis, of breaking the fourth wall, is that, like, there's this old chestnut that's been kicked around the paranormal for a while, which is like once you start looking at the phenomenon starts looking back at you. This is an idea that was John Keel's reflective factor, right?
Right.
The idea that you take an interest in these things and these things take an interest in you. Granted, I've had that happen to varying degrees in my life. Like, I think maybe it might be an interest plus sacrifice, like something like that. But generally speaking, this is something that a lot of people have found, is the more interest they have in these topics, the more they experience these topics. And that, to me, seems like a metaleptic break.
Yeah.
And, you know, sure enough, you sort of look at authors who have put themselves into their work in the paranormal, and they tend to have the strangest experiences. You know, Whitley Strieber's a good example of that.
Sure.
John Keel's an example of that. Guess who doesn't have enough weird experiences and leaves himself out of his books? This guy. So that's the ritual. That's the low key ritual of fourth wall phantoms. Is that like I'm finally putting myself into the book, and I'm interested to see if it's going to make strange things happen more often.
Well,
and
you know,
I'm telling myself it will. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's pick that apart about you know, because you cite some great examples of, you know, in filmmaking. You know, there's this old adage in the movie world, in the film business, where it's like, you know, directors are very important, but films and movies and TV, for that matter, are made by the editor. They really are.
Yeah.
It for you
Lives
know,
and dies in the edit. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think about a film being made, there's all these, you know, shots. They shoot it out of order. They, you know, folks, in case you didn't know, movies are not shot in order. They block shoot certain locations, wrap that location, move on. So they're shot out of order, and then it's made whole and made into a narrative by the editor. But you had these great examples of people actually editing themselves out of the UFO phenomenon that may be troubling them or they want to get out. The example that comes to my mind is Albert K. Bender, who made a big splash in the UFO world and then edited himself out of the UFO story.
Yeah, I mean, once you get out, you can get yourself out. Well, I mean, this is kind of the story. Yeah, are the Men in Black the metalepsis police? Like, you know,
yes.
You know, are they the ones who are controlling like what goes in and comes out of the story?
You actually say, I mean, sorry to quote you, but you kind of say like they're the movie producers making sure the script and the plot is being fulfilled.
Right? Yeah.
And I love
they're
that.
the execs that come down and who are like, yeah, you're over budget. Stop.
Yeah, they're doing those random, like, you know, not often, but visits to the set to make sure the director is getting the job done, coming in on budget. Like it really hit hard for me.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. So another good example of that is this really weird. The story itself deserves to be read, but the account of New Zealand ufologist John Stewart and Doreen Wilkinson. I believe her name in the book was Barbara, but her name was Doreen. Or vice versa. Anyway, I can't keep that straight. But like, it was very clear that like they had started examining. They got an interest in UFOs. Like he had a sighting, and then nothing happened. And then after the war, because he had a sighting in World War II, and he came back home, he started a UFO club, and that's when stuff started looking back at him, right? And basically, it was they just had to drop the saucer mess and do something different and forget about it. And that's the only way that they sort of were able to extricate themselves from this. You know, we can talk about how true the whole story was or not,
right.
But like that's the same idea. Is that like he had to edit himself out of the story to make things, you know, just happen normal again. You know, there were a couple of researchers that Keel talked about whose names escape me, but you know, they were having strange phone calls and strange people coming up and talking to them and bothering them, and then as soon as they like decided to be like, okay, I'm into woodworking now, like
right,
then you don't get that sort of looking back. So, and that's sort of that is a metaleptic fourth wall thing, because you know the fourth wall is all about characters acknowledging that the reality that they're in is not accurate and directly looking at the audience and saying, oh, you are the watchers,
right,
or you are the controllers, I'm acknowledging you. And then reality starts to break down, or their mental health starts to break down, which is another thing that you see in the UFO phenomenon as well. But yeah, I think that there's some sort of there is a lesson in there, and but also the sense of agency that it's like you can acknowledge that the character can have a nervous breakdown from realizing that they're a fictional character, right?
Right.
Or they can, you know, or they can Tex Avery that shit, and like climb the question mark above their heads and use it to, you know, get where they're going, or any number of those things, you know. So like there's this idea of like agency and authorization that comes into the story when you're thinking about like, oh, once you realize that you're in this construct, and once you've realized that you're in this construct and you have transgressed that hierarchy, be it paranormal or be it artistic, then you can sort of do whatever you want. Like the impossible becomes possible. You can do yeah. And so again, that's that idea of like, once you realize this, then that's sort of the secret to unlocking and being able to change reality around. Again, that's a damn good metaphor for the paranormal. Like I can't, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And so really that's what the book's about, right?
Yeah.
The fictional incursions are like a fun way to get to that for me, because I'm more of a theoretician than I am, a field guy or
but that's
yeah.
But I mean, I think theoreticians are kind of the most important aspect of this. We
Well,
have plenty of. I mean that I'm not, field research.
Astronauts need astronomers, and astronomers need astronauts.
100%. Yeah,
that's what it comes down to.
I agree. Yeah, I shouldn't say. I guess for me, the theoreticians is what really gets my juices flowing.
Right.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Same thing for me. Yeah.
Right. But I want to say to the you kind of raise this question, and Jeffrey Kripal raises this question too, where are stories in mythology found or created? And you kind of give an example, and actually I don't know if it's even connected to that idea, but like you give this example of a sculptor looking at a piece of marble,
right?
And they don't say like, I'm not sculpting, I'm not creating the thing. The sculpture, it was within this. I'm just chiseling it away to show it to people.
Yeah, I mean that has been my experience, as a creative person, is that like whenever I'm writing music, which is probably my main creative endeavor besides writing books, but even a little bit with writing books, like it will tell you where it's going to go, and it will tell you what works and what doesn't work. And it's like this, it might be a great idea that you have, but it's not going to fit this thing because this thing has sort of taken on an agency of its own.
Right.
And yeah, there's not like, you don't look at a block of wood and you say, I'm going to carve XYZ out of it. You say, oh, there's an owl in that wood, or oh, there's there's a canoe that I can sculpt out of this wood. Right. And like, look, part of that part of those are practical concerns, right? Like you can't you can't carve a bowl out of a dowel rod, right? Like, right. But part of it too is like just sort of there is something that sort of idea that Eric Wargo's been trying to get at too, is like, where does inspiration come from? What is that?
Right.
And I think there are a bunch of different ways that you can look at it, and I don't think any of them are necessarily wrong. You can look at it retrocausally. You can look at it panpsychically, like this block of wood. Yeah, there's an owl in that block of wood, and that block of wood is telling me somehow that it wants me to carve an owl out of it.
Right.
Or you can look at this idea that there's this buffet, or P.L. Travers, the creator of Mary Poppins, said that ideas were like balloons and they drifted around until they found someone. Right. That there's the idea of that owl found you, and it's like, well, find a block of wood that works.
Right.
So and I think that and this is where I think some people might run into an issue with fourth wall phantoms, is like, if you are a creative person, that, like, you feel that, like, that's, right. That's something you take for granted almost. Like, sure, there's another hand here in this process. You might not think about it often, but like, there's another hand here in this process. Doesn't mean there's not blood, sweat, and tears that go into it too. But like, there's a hidden hand in this process. And I think the people who are, unsurprisingly, the people who are more obsessed with data are not going to get that quite in the same way that the creative people will. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This definitely is a book that, I mean, I guess, like it sometimes it feels like weird to call yourself a creative person, but like, I mean, I guess I have made my living in the creative arts, so I guess I can. But like, that's why I feel like this book was like the book for me. I don't feel like I'll ever love a book this much. Like, I feel like in a way it's almost sad, because I'm like, I think I just read the best Fortean book, and now it's all downhill from here.
No.
I mean, like, I don't literally mean that, but like, there was like almost like a brief moment of melancholia, because I was like, oh, this is the book I was waiting for, and now I got it, and now I don't get another one of these. Well, but like,
it's like when you envy people watching a TV series for the first time. Like, oh man, I wish it was my first time watching that TV series.
That's
yeah,
exactly
kinda
right.
that.
Like, I'm so jealous of the listeners right now who get to read this book for the first time. And folks, if you ever want to talk about this, I'll give you my phone number because I could talk about it forever. But Josh, really quick, I'm going to be back in 45 seconds. Can you vamp and just maybe tell everyone what you're planning on having for dinner later, or just something off topic? I'll be right back.
I'll actually do all the promotional stuff that I usually do.
Yeah, do that. Go ahead, do it. I'll be right back.
So, my website is joshuacutchin.com. That's JOSHUACUTCHIN.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram if you look hard enough. I do offer signed autographed copies of Fourth Wall Phantoms for no extra charge. I should be getting my next set of copies on June 11th, so if you're hearing this after the fact, then go ahead and write me. If you're hearing this before then go ahead and wait. I offer copies in the U.S. only. International postage is not as cooperative as I would like it to be. I've had a lot of stuff get lost. So if you're in the U.S. and you want a copy of Fourth Wall Phantoms, you can write me. Otherwise, you can find it at the usual spots. I do have some events that are coming up this year. The one that's coming up first is going to be me and Steve Berg.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're both going to be at the Paracon Kansas City this August 2nd. And it's actually, there's a podcast party on August 1st as well. So yeah, it's going to be a fun time. I'm just really excited to be there. It's a great lineup. You can find out more information about that at paraconkc.com. And then I will, at the end of the month, I'm coming back to the Midwest for the Cape Girardeau Paranormal Convention. And the website for that is semomysticevents.com. And that's going to be a fun one because I will be there. Well, no, it's not going to be fun because I'll be there. I mean, I'd like to think it's going to be fun because I'm there. But it's semomysticevents.com. I will be there. Micah Hanks will be there, and my good friend Tim Renner and his crew will be there. So
great! That's awesome.
And that's in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And then,
really quick, can I say?
Yeah.
Do you know Cape Girardeau is about 45 minutes from the mythical Marley Woods?
Yes. Yeah.
I hope you get a chance to go.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to talk to
Michael Huntington will take you. He'll take you.
I've already been back and forth with Michael, so I'm going to see Michael while I'm there. So that's then, and then there's something that's happening in December that I still can't tell anybody about because the paperwork hasn't been signed, but some really big news coming up in December, and hopefully some other exciting news that's on the horizon as well. So if you want to see me and Steve, come down to Leavenworth, Kansas.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
I think it's going to be awesome. The buzz about this event, like apparently tickets are going like hotcakes. And
get them while they last, folks. It's going to be a fun one. Kansas City is such an awesome place.
I'm basically living for because once I hit once I fly out there on the end of July, then it's off to the races for me in terms of stuff for the remainder of the year.
Right. Well, spooky season starts. Cause it's busy for a guy like you.
Spooky season starts, and I'm having the best Halloween ever.
Yeah, we are. Well, we're gonna. I would love to do a show because really quick, folks. Joshua and I and Tim Banal of America. We love that show as well.
It's my birthday and Christmas present.
Josh's birthday and Christmas present. The three of us are going on an official Bigfoot expedition with a guide and everything, and it is going to be amazing. And I'm going to force you guys to do a show. I think Tim and I have already talked about we're going to do a little crossover show, just talking about our experience.
Oh yeah, I mean, even if nothing happens, I mean, look, let's face it, something dramatic and weird is going to happen, right?
Yeah,
it's going to happen. But even if nothing would, in that completely unrealistic scenario, there's still going to be enough oddities and experiences to talk about, I'm sure. Strange happenings in the airport and
absolutely.
Things like that, so.
Yeah, and knowing me, I'll go over everything we ate. And, I do love camping food, so
I've been we were talking earlier about sort of planning for everyone's visit down here, and I'm already gaming out that first night dinner with Sarah. Do we go out or do we fix my favorite dishes that you make? What do we do? Home cooked meals.
I do love a home cooked meal more than anything in the world. I love a restaurant, but I love a home cooking because it says something about the person. It's like reading a little biography of the person, what they serve you.
I agree, but part of me is also would it be nice to go out to a restaurant before we spend
That's true.
Plus hours in the
That's
woods.
true. That's true.
I don't know.
Eating
We'll see.
beanies and weenies. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Do we want to really treat ourselves? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it's going to be so much fun. I'm so thrilled. It's like the big thing. It's the big carrot for me right now.
Yeah, same.
Josh, I'm going to jump right back into this because I want to use the remainder of our time wisely, if you don't mind. But like, there is. I remember there was a line in there that I remember I had to like put the book down and just think about it for a second, and it really moved me. And I don't know if you meant it to be this profound, but like, it's the unreality of something doesn't prevent sightings.
Did I say that, or was I quoting someone?
I can't remember if you might have been quoting someone.
Yeah, because I know that Eric Davis talks about
it very well could have been Eric Davis.
Anomaly as a feature of the real.
Yeah. I love that. That idea is very interesting to me.
Yeah, that's something that I think that probably deserves a little bit more of a spotlight. You know, Eric Davis, of who wrote High Weirdness, not the other Eric Davis.
Great book too.
Pointed that out, and it's just one of those things where it's like we accept outliers in every system that we ever have. Like, you know, I don't care what it is you do. Like, there's always going to be like a hiccup or like a bug or a glitch or something. Except with like the big picture. Then no anomalies ever. You know, and I think that is interesting, is sort of viewing that as anomalies as a natural part of that of the process of any system unfolding and progressing. I think is a really important idea.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it kind of speaks to that EVP idea. You know, it was there one minute and wasn't there the next, and that doesn't make it any real. It doesn't make it any more real now, and it doesn't make it any less real then.
Right. Another thing I want to bring up too is you kind of hint upon, you know, the importance of, like, you know, from a psychonaut perspective of Timothy Leary's idea of set and setting being so important before doing a psychedelic trip. But I also think set and setting is, you know, you're like, you know, you point this out. It's not my idea. That set and setting is important to high strangeness encounters. And it made me even think about, just like as a person who's, you know, done theater and done a zillion comedy shows, when I'm standing in like the bar before the show, it's like, hey, meeting my fellow castmates, hey, blah, blah, and then, you know, someone says, hey, it's time to go to the green room. The show starts in 20 minutes. There is a chemical change in me where all of a sudden adrenaline kicks in. I start getting a little more serious about things. Then once I'm in the green room, there is this Bardo purgatory feeling where it's like I'm out of reality, but I'm not on stage in the fictional world yet, and I'm in this in-between zone waiting to go out and perform.
Yep.
And you know, like that's why when I was telling you, it's like I will never look at performing and art and any creative endeavor I do the same again. And I'll tell you what, it has brought me such happiness. Like, this book made me so happy.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's something that. Yeah, I think though that, like, sort of Bardo state is a good place to be, because like, you know, I have plenty of friends who are like touring musicians and such, and, you know, number one, that life looks a lot more glamorous than it is. Like, you don't get to see San Francisco and Bozeman and Chicago. You get to see like a green room in San Francisco and Bozeman and Montana, 100%. Chicago.
Yep.
But like, there is something that I've noticed in my time in the green room. Like, I play fairly often, right? You know, I played around. I probably average about 4 dates a month around here.
That's a lot.
Some of them are big, some of them are little. Well, you know, I'm a Tua player, right? I'm not exactly in high demand. But like, my friends who have been on the road or do this like 5 days a week, my friends who play instruments that people actually want, there's like this green room vibe with them where it really does feel like they're getting ready to do data entry or something, you know. And that's a place I never want to be. You know, because they'll all just be sitting there on their phones, you know, and they have to be coaxed on stage. They're not like excited to go play. And, you know, I think that sort of like still having that chemical change and that sort of spark, I think is important. And I think that, you know, I can't say for certain, because I haven't been on the road in this sort of capacity, but I think the people who tend to lose their luster over the years and seem to be phoning it in, they don't have that anymore. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I will tell you, like, I have been performing professionally for over 20 years now. I just did a stand-up show last Thursday, and all day I go through this same cycle, and it's always been this way for me. And there is an element of torture where I have confidence until the day of the show. I wake up, I'm almost really depressed. I have imposter syndrome. My wife is so sick of me hearing this. I'm like, I suck. I'm not funny. There's nothing about me that's funny, and my material's horrible.
Well, I mean, you do suck and you aren't funny. But,
that's true. We all know that. You know, but it actually is. It's gut wrenching to me. All up until the moment I'm walking on stage, then I have full confidence. But like even like before the show, 5 minutes before the show, I'm kind of waiting in the wings, watching the comedian before me, and I'm closing out the night. I was like sweating. I had so much adrenaline. I was like, and I have like calm yourself, breathe in deep. But I'm like, that I'll never get over that. And I don't know if that's a maybe an amateur part of like of my performance level, but like I like it. I feel like I need to go through these like paces of like self-doubt, torture, extreme nervousness. And weird thing is I have stage fright. I've been going on stage since 1995. Yet I have it as bad as anyone does.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny. Like that's the main thing that I don't miss from classical music is like stage fright for like classical music is like huge. Was huge for me, and it's the sort of thing where like this isn't the case, but it kind of is the case where like there's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this, and we all have scores in our laps and we're following along. And if we hear you chip a note, we're going to notice. And that wasn't very much in tune. And like that's sort of like just I do not miss that one bit. The stuff that I do now, the jazz stuff, it's like, well, you know, it's jazz. You know,
yeah, baby.
You show up and you go out there, and it's about expression, and like you know, it doesn't mean that there aren't standards, and it doesn't mean that you don't want to do your best, but like,
mistakes can be beautiful.
Mistakes can be beautiful. There's a sense of spontaneity. There's not necessarily a right way or a wrong way to do stuff, as long as it sounds good. You know, which is you know, I still get some stage fright with the public speaking on this stuff, mainly because I just, as evidenced by the length of Fourth Wall Phantoms.
Yeah.
I tend to go along with things.
Right.
And so like I'm trying to like really get through all the material really rapidly, and sometimes I talk too fast and I just sort of, you know, then I end up getting out of breath and I have to hold, but then I'll now I've got too much breath. Or you have to breathe off the I have too much breath. What do I do with it? Yeah. So yeah, but I think that again, like having a little bit of that gives you an edge. You know?
I think so too. I think so too. Sometimes I wonder if like I'm imposing that upon myself because I need that to go on and do the best job I possibly can. Because I feel like whenever I'm comfortable with something, like, you know, too comfortable with something, I feel like I can't harness all the like skills I need. I think I need like a little bit of like that stage fright and adrenaline to wake up my brain in a different way.
I mean, you know, it only takes so many times where you go into a situation where you're like, I've got this knocked, it's fine, and you eat it.
Yes.
Like
that's when I eat it.
That happens once or twice, and you're like, oh shit, I can't do that again. Like I can't. Yeah. I mean, yeah. There was a lot of that when I was drinking.
Right. Well, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. But I even feel like that, you know, kind of like tying it back to like, you know, a high strange encounter. It's like, I think part of the absurdity and surrealism is to help us remember. And sometimes, and to make a bigger impact.
Well, you know, I do have to say that there might be something to that, because this is something that I've noticed I've had to start keeping a journal of strange things that have happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because there really does, at least for me, seem to be a half-life to these things. Like in the moment you're like, holy cow, that was amazing. And then like part of you stops remembering it so much or as often. But another part of you starts to insert this like, well, it was probably, you know, it was probably a house light, or it was probably, you know, a helicopter, or it was probably just a, you know, your eyes were playing tricks on things, or you were tired. And so like I think keeping a journal of these things not only keeps you honest about how you felt in the moment, so you say, no, that was the thing that happened, but also it helps you, you know, retain memory of them. And I think that there's something to this, because you know, that's something that's reported in a lot of these psychedelic states, is that, you know, if you don't write it down, you're not going to remember it. Same thing with dreams.
Yes.
And is that not the same thing that happens with angel hair and ectoplasm? You know, it evaporates. Even if you put it in a jar, it evaporates.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think that there's something, at the very least, poetic about that. It's not like a literal truth. Like you've got it. These things don't necessarily want to be handed on to. And again, like, that's Ibapio, right? They're there, and then they're not, you know.
Yeah, the impermanence is kind of like, well, it makes it more profound in a way, because if you could take the angel hair, study it, then you could debunk it, and like it doesn't have this magical quality anymore.
It stays in that pH of disbelief, right?
That's exactly right. And I think that's part of the point of, like, you know, why the Bigfoot tracks end, and why, you know, like I think, you know, and that may just be my own personal like want and desire to keep things as weird as possible, because I am like, my favorite art form, what inspired me as a kid to want to do all this stuff, is David Lynch. And he is the only American filmmaker really who was comfortable living in surrealism. So much so that he couldn't get funding in America. Yet France had to fund all his films, you know? Like, but like, I mean, I think Lynch, and you know, and he's off, I thought of him throughout the book, because his whole thing was, I don't come up with these ideas. I go into a meditation and I take my fishing rod and I fish for them in a sea of endless possibilities.
There were so many different, like, that's such a refrain that I hear from, I've read from so many creatives, that like, I wish, like, again, this book could have, people are going to complain about how long it is, but it could have been like 4 times longer.
I wish it would.
Not only with examples of every fictional incursion, but also like people who are creatives who are saying, no, this is the way this thing works.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's only, you know, not to be too dismissive, because like the STEM people literally keep the world together, but like, it's just you STEM people who don't get this. Like, this comes from somewhere else. Like, it's not us. Like, we're not, you know, and you know, I think that there's something to that. And again, it feels right.
Right. It's like we're channeling pre-existing stories.
Yeah.
You know, like,
which goes back to the idea of, you know, whether myths are invented or discovered. And I think that, you know, for me, they're discovered. And again, which ties into, like, you know, we can have a debate about, you know, nature or nurture and tabula rasa, but like, as the father of 2 human beings that literally cannot be more like each other, they're identical. Oh, it's totally nature. It's not nurture. like they're raised the same way. They have the same DNA.
Right.
Like but they are completely different. Like, there's something there that wasn't created, it was discovered.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. Josh, I want to I'm going to let you go, because I've taken up so much of your time here in a second, but like, I want to kind of, one big question is, I think this is your quote. I'm sorry if
it's okay.
If someone else is, you know, but there's this question that I love so much, and are we art? We both possess mental and physical boundaries.
Yeah, I think that might have been me, but it's an idea that I've seen a lot of places, and I mean, yes, like, why is this even a question? You know, I mean,
right.
Granted, so your life is a work of art, and you can choose to do a lot of different things with it. And I'm not saying that you have every choice open to you, you know. I'm not going to win a beauty pageant. Neither am I, baby. I'm not going to be drafted to any team, you know. But then again, that's the best art isn't a free for all either.
Yeah.
You know, there's this phrase that I've heard that I really resonate with, that I even mentioned in the book, like, restriction breeds creativity.
Yes.
You know, it really does. Like, okay, here's what you got. What can you make out of it?
Right.
How can you transcend the boundaries of what you've got? So, with that in mind, the idea that we don't all have the same opportunities afforded to us.
Yeah.
But we all have the same potential of agency to do with our lives what we can within the parameters that we've been given.
Right.
I'm better at some things than other people are. Other people are better at things than I am, you know? And so, like, create that art as your life. And I don't mean that you have to be a creative person.
Right.
You know, or there are different types of creativity.
There is. There's different, and there's varying degrees, like, I think, too.
My brother-in-law can make any piece of furniture in the world. That is explicitly creative, right? But, like,
absolutely.
At the same time, like, if you're an engineer, like, you can still... There is an artistry in the way that you live your life, in the way that you conduct yourself, in the way that you forge relationships and maintain relationships. There is an artistry in your efficiency, and, you know, I do think that while not every occupation or vocation is creative, there is creativity in every occupation and vocation. It can be found.
I could not agree more.
So yeah, we're art.
Yeah.
And we have boundaries, and the boundaries are physical. They're the limitations that we have been given through our God-given talents, and they're also the time that we have. You know?
Right.
I mean, there's some people who, you know, I turned 40 this year, and there are some people who were 28 years old and just did more with that time.
No, I hear you.
Like,
yeah.
how old was Hendrix, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. No,
Yeah.
I mean you're not wrong. I hear you. It's like,
Yeah.
but
I'm gonna look that up. How old was Hendrix?
I think he was 20. He was part of the 27 club.
Yeah, he was 27. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not. Yeah, he did more than I. You know. So I think that, and what I love about that is that it does take, again, so much of, I think, fourth wall fandoms is about taking pressures off, right? You know.
Yes. You want to know what? That's kind of a great way to kind of come to the end of this. But like, there was a huge pressure valve released for me when you kind of said explicitly talk about this in the first third of the book, where it's like, I understand the ideas of retrocausality and like some of these like quantum physics concepts of like the multiverse and everything being infinity,
Right.
or space like going on infinitely. And you said like, I don't love that. Basically, more or less, you know, you're like, I'm going to work within the frame of the lens or the frame of the painting. And to me, that was like, it actually, you were able to distill down this feeling I've had that like when I do read about these infinite possibility things, I think a lot of people, it may resonate with them in a positive way. For me, it's always negative.
Right.
It bothers me for some reason.
Well, you know, the idea of like the multiverse and multiple parallel realities, especially as seen in media, but we'll circle back around to speculation about the paranormal. It is a kind of lack of creativity.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's the same as saying these things can't happen. It's the same as too much restriction. You know, it's just as crippling, right? And so, like, that might be what's going on. Maybe there are, you know, an infinite amount of Joshes, and you know, some of them are, you know, indeed married to Amy Adams. I mean, I'm fine with that. But you know, but I don't know what to do with that, because at that point you write a book and it's like, well, everything can happen, you know, the end. So let's set up. So my approach for Fourth Wall Phantoms was to sort of take that sort of idea that I would take as a creative person. Let's put up some guardrails.
Yeah.
Let's say that this is what we're operating under. If you want to, like, we're operating under this. If you want to explore this other stuff, fine. This ain't the place for it. You know?
Right.
Or like, you know, mental illness. Like, I'm sure that there are some people in this book that did not see what they saw, and they are suffering from something like that. This ain't the place for it. Like, you can go to Skeptical Inquirer and read all you want to, you know.
Absolutely.
And so just having again that's what it was for me. It was taking off the pressure, because like, it's like, well, do I bring in Derrida and Baudrillard? You know, no, just like set up some parameters for yourself and try to work as best you can within those parameters.
Right. I think like, you know, basically it's like parameters in some semblance of a guardrail breeds creativity.
Yeah.
And not only creativity, I think some of the best works, you know, like the works we celebrate today. You know, I really do think like when you don't
Jaws.
have parameters, I mean, yeah,
you know, the shark
great
looked
example.
like crap, and so like, well, let's hide the shark more. It's better, you know.
And Spielberg may not have had a career after that. That might have been the only thing we heard from him, because he had extreme parameters. I mean, look, even like David Lynch always. I mean, I use him as an example a lot because I love him so much. But he didn't want too big of budgets. He was like, I need $8 million, and it's like, we can give you 15. It's like, I don't need it. It'll actually distract me from working in the parameters that I have given myself that I don't tell other people about. But I only want $8 million. Like he would literally turn down bigger budgets. No director ever did that. Like,
and that's so. I love that. Like, I really do. I think that. I mean, that, you know, it sort of touches on what we were talking about earlier with, like, sort of the problems of creativity that we see in Hollywood. Like, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Is that there are no more mid-budget films, you know?
No.
They just don't exist.
And those are my favorites. The films are in between. I love low budget. I sometimes love high budget movies, but I love the Robert Altman movies. I love, you know, the Louis Buñuel movies. And those are mid-range budget films.
And the other thing about, like, not only does it breed creativity, but, like, what are we really saying when restriction breeds creativity?
Yep.
It's saying that restriction invites something else to come in and participate. Yeah. Right? Like, that's what it is. It invites something else to come in and participate. And, like, that might be what discipline is in general,
Mm-hmm.
right? That might be why discipline yields such incredible results, is because you are inviting something outside of you to come in and participate.
Yes.
And we just see it in the creative more because it's more flashy and it's more visual and it's more, it's more in your face. But like maybe that's what discipline is it's an invitation to that other thing to come in and participate.
Right. And I want to say for the listeners right now, like I have focused quite a bit on breaking down some of the narrative structures and using cinema as a way to look at it. I want to tell people this book is full of high strangeness stories. This is not a film critique book where I hope I didn't make it sound like that, but that's the lens I use for high strangeness will always be art.
There are stories, stories, and there are stories that have not been. There's some stories that I was not familiar with. There's the one about there's some good surprises in there, but there's also some stories.
God-tier high strangeness in this book, folks. I cannot tell you that enough.
There are a couple of stories that I can guarantee have not been printed anywhere else because I conducted the interviews for them. So so it's
So I mean, like if you are a high strange enthusiast, oh boy, is this book for you. And I think most of my listeners probably are. So.
And honestly, like I think this is in some ways, I don't know, this might appeal to more people than others, but it's definitely the most occult book like that I've written. Like that's really where this book lives and thrives, I think.
Right. Yeah. Josh, I just, and again, and I mean this so deeply sincerely, like I swear I can separate the bias of our friendship from my love of this book. Like you could be somebody I don't like Joshua Cutchin, but I love that book. You know what I'm saying? Like
death of the author.
And the book is undeniable for me. I think it is so important. And I really do believe, this is my prediction, that this book is going to be, as long as there are human beings around who are interested in this stuff, this book is going to be a major player. It is such a massive, important contribution to these fields.
Well, if I had the choice between it being decent for a lot of people or it being indispensable for a few, I'd choose the latter.
Yeah.
And, because I think that, again, it's very the novel is personal. The novel that I wrote is personal, but it's like, the novel was more about like what happens in my head, but like so much of this is what happens in my heart.
Right. Well, I've always thought of you as one of those authors who sometimes people have to catch up to you because you have this natural ability
a lot
to be
catching up to do.
That's a great blog.
Yeah.
That's a great blog site right there.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll start it. I explicitly write about your but no, I mean that is the dearest comment ever. Like there are a handful of people who have, throughout time who have talked about these, subjects, and you're one of them, man. Like I can't believe I know you and I'm gonna call you my friend. Like it's just so neat when I can actually like talk to the author. And I'm so sorry, I'm gonna apologize to you in the future we're hanging out 2 times this summer, and both times I am going to just hammer you with questions about the book.
That's fine by me. It's fine.
So
by
I
me.
apologize. Yeah. You're like, Steve, enough. Can we talk about baseball? But buddy, I love you so much. Thank you so much for writing this book. I mean it so much. Like it made me so happy, and now I feel so excited about this stuff again. Like it really it's gonna fuel my tank for years now.
That's a big part. No, I feel like that's part of the reason I did it too. I mentioned the fact that it was sort of 10 years since the Trojan Feast, and and like this is sort of the state of the union of Josh's head.
Yeah. Well,
now let's sally forth. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, really quick, I'm not sure if did you give everyone where they can find more of your work and where they can buy it?
It's all in there.
Okay, well, it'll of course be in the show notes.
Let's come swamp Kansas City. Come on, folks. I think it's like $10.
It is. It's $10.
Yeah.
I mean that. I'm like, maybe make it. Hopefully they make enough money to do it again. But I'm like, you can charge more than $10, folks. But I mean, it's beautiful. It's going to be such a good time. So if you're in the Midwest area, or you just feel like hopping on a plane, come travel, come see us. We're very approachable. We'll hang out. We'll talk. We'll even break bread together. But Josh, I love you, buddy. This is just beautiful. The book. I'm so proud of you. And I'm just thrilled to get to know you and also bother you for years and years and years with questions.
Well, I love you too, brother, and thank you so much for your support. And I'm glad that it's touched you in this way. And I will looking forward to seeing you.
You too, man. Folks, go out and buy this book. You're gonna love it. And if you want to discuss it with me, please feel free to reach out because I could talk about this book. I mean, like, it's almost one of these things where I want to do a lecture about this book, which makes no sense. Like, we're going to be at a conference together. Like, Berg, what are you doing your lecture about? I'm like, oh, about your book. You're like, what? You can't do that. But no, seriously, please, I cannot recommend this enough. So hopefully I've emphasized that. But everyone, thank you so much again for listening to another episode of Hi Strangers. Please enjoy your dinner tonight. Taste. Bye. 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 Wait. Oh, no.